The greatest gift for your brother's wedding is you vanishing from this family forever. Those words hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't flinch. I just sat there at our family dining table, staring at the untouched meatloaf on my plate, while my parents delivered what felt like my death sentence with the same casual tone they'd used to discuss the weather. My name is Maya, and at 28 years old, I had finally heard what my family really thought of me. Not whispered behind closed doors or implied through their actions, but said directly to my face, clear as daylight. Maya, you understand, don't you? My mother's voice carried that familiar, patronising tone, the one she'd perfected over the years whenever she needed to make me disappear quietly. This wedding is important for our family's reputation. David is marrying into the Morrison family. You know how influential they are in this town. My father nodded, cutting his meatloaf with surgical precision. Your brother has worked so hard to build his image. The guest list is full of important people. His colleagues from the law firm, potential business partners, people who matter. He paused, his knife suspended mid-air. You know how you stand out. Your presence might make the guests uncomfortable. Stand out. That was their polite way of saying I was the family embarrassment, the daughter who didn't fit their picture-perfect narrative. While my golden child brother David graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law and landed a 6-figure job at the city's most prestigious firm, I was the art school dropout who waited tables and lived in a cramped studio apartment across town. But the truth was far more complicated than they knew. So, what exactly are you asking me to do? I kept my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. My mother's smile was sugar-sweet and poisonous. We're not asking, honey. We're telling you. The kindest thing you can do for David, for all of us, is to just not be there. Maybe take a little vacation that weekend. Go visit that friend of yours in Portland. My father leaned back in his chair, satisfied. Think of it as a gift to your brother. The gift of a perfect day without any complications. I looked around the dining room where I'd eaten thousands of meals, at the family photos lining the mantel, photos where I appeared less and less frequently over the years. The message had always been clear, but never this explicit. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. My parents waited for my usual compliance, my typical role as the accommodating daughter who never made waves. They expected tears, maybe some begging, a few desperate promises to behave myself. Instead, I pushed back from the table and stood up. Okay, I said simply. My mother blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. Okay? You want me to vanish from this family forever? Consider it done. I walked towards the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. I'll pack my things tonight. Maya, don't be so dramatic, my father called after me. We're talking about one weekend. I turned around, and something in my expression must have made him stop mid-sentence. No, Dad, you were very clear. The greatest gift I can give this family is disappearing forever. I'm just following instructions. As I climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom, I could hear them whispering urgently below, probably trying to figure out why I wasn't fighting back. They didn't understand that I'd stopped fighting years ago. I'd just been waiting for them to finally say what we all knew was true. My bedroom looked exactly the same as it had when I left for college 10 years ago. Pink walls, stuffed animals, participation trophies, from activities my parents had forced me into to round out my college applications. But unlike David's room, which had been converted into my father's home office the moment he moved out, mine remained frozen in time. A shrine to the daughter they wished I'd stayed. I pulled out my old duffel bag and started packing methodically. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, the few personal items that actually mattered to me. As I moved around the room, memories flooded back, memories that explained exactly how we'd arrived at this moment. I was 7 years old when I first realised I was different. It was my birthday. And I'd been waiting all day for my parents to acknowledge it. They'd made such a big deal about David's birthday the month before, the themed party, the elaborate cake, the pile of presents. But as dinner time approached and nothing had been mentioned about my special day, I finally worked up the courage to remind them. "Mum, it's my birthday today." She looked up from stirring something on the stove, momentarily confused. Oh, honey, of course. Happy birthday. We've been so busy with David's science fair project. She trailed off, her attention already shifting back to the pot. "We'll celebrate this weekend, okay?" But that weekend came and went without mention, and the next weekend. Eventually I stopped asking. When I was 16, I desperately wanted a car like all my friends were getting. David had received a brand new Honda Civic for his 16th birthday, complete with a big red bow in the driveway and a surprise party. When my birthday approached, I hinted and hoped, even circled used cars in the classified ads to show how reasonable I was being. Instead, my parents handed me a bus pass and told me it would be good for me to learn independence. That same year, David got caught cheating on his SATs, a scandal that should have derailed his college prospects. But instead of consequences, he got expensive tutoring, test prep courses, and a donation to his first choice university that magically made his application more appealing. When I struggled with math and asked for help, I was told to figure it out myself or find a study group at school. The pattern was clear. David's problems were family emergencies that required all hands on deck. My problems were character-building opportunities that I needed to solve alone. By the time I graduated high school, the golden child versus scapegoat dynamic was set in stone. David's acceptance to Harvard Law was celebrated with a family vacation to Europe. My acceptance to art school was met with lectures about practical career choices and warnings that they couldn't help me financially. So I didn't ask for help. I worked 3 jobs to pay my tuition, lived on ramen noodles and determination, and somehow managed to graduate with a degree in business administration, a compromise major I thought might win their approval. It didn't. While David's every achievement was broadcast on social media and celebrated at family gatherings, my accomplishments were quietly ignored. When I got my first real job, managing operations for a small catering company, my parents responded with a polite, "That's nice, dear," before immediately changing the subject to David's latest promotion. But here's what they didn't know. That small catering company had grown into something much bigger under my management. And the keys I was about to grab from my dresser drawer weren't just apartment keys. I finished packing and zipped up my duffel bag. Then I opened my jewellery box, not for jewellery, but for the business documents I kept hidden in the secret compartment at the bottom. Partnership papers, incorporation documents, and most importantly, the deed that showed my 50% ownership in Morrison Events, the premier catering and event planning company in our city, the same company that had been hired to handle my brother's wedding. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, my best friend from college, and now my business partner. She was also a brilliant attorney who'd helped me navigate the legal complexities of our business expansion. "Are you okay? You sounded strange on the phone earlier." I texted back, "Coming over now, we need to talk." As I carried my bag downstairs, I could hear my parents in the living room, their voices raised in whispered argument. "Maybe we were too harsh," my mother was saying. "She looked so cold." "She'll get over it," my father replied. "Maya's always been sensitive. She just needs time to process." They still didn't get it. They thought this was about hurt feelings or sibling rivalry. They had no idea they'd just declared war on someone who'd been quietly building an empire while they weren't paying attention. I walked through the kitchen toward the garage, passing the same refrigerator that displayed dozens of photos of David's achievements and exactly 0 of mine. The same countertops where I'd sat doing homework alone while my parents attended David's soccer games and academic competitions. My car keys were hanging on the hook by the garage door, keys to the Honda Civic. I'd bought myself 3 years ago when the bus schedule started interfering with my work meetings. Right next to them were the keys they didn't know about, the ones to my downtown office, my warehouse, and the life I'd built entirely outside their awareness. I grabbed both sets and headed for the door. "Maya?" My mother appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking uncertain for the first time all evening. "Where are you going?" I turned to look at her one last time. At 55, she was still beautiful in that polished country club way that impressed the neighbours. She dedicated her life to maintaining appearances, to building the perfect family image. Having a daughter who didn't fit the mould had always been her biggest challenge. "I'm giving you what you asked for," I said calmly. "I'm vanishing." "But honey, we just meant—" "I know exactly what you meant, Mom. You've been meaning it my whole life. You've just never said it this clearly before." I walked into the garage and threw my duffel bag into the back seat of my car. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw both my parents standing in the doorway, looking confused and slightly panicked. It was probably the first time in years they'd been forced to really look at me, to consider me as a person rather than a problem to be managed. The drive to Jessica's apartment took 20 minutes through the tree-lined streets of our suburban neighbourhood, streets where I'd walked home alone from school while David got rides to his various activities. Streets where I'd learned to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible, in a family that had already decided I was too much. But I wasn't invisible anymore. And by the time David's wedding day arrived, they were going to understand exactly how much space I actually occupied in their perfect little world. I pulled into Jessica's driveway and sat in my car for a moment, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. 28 years of hoping they'd see me, value me, love me the way they loved David. 28 years of making myself smaller, quieter, less complicated. And now they'd finally told me the truth. The best thing I could do for this family was disappear forever. I smiled for the first time all day. They had no idea how much power they'd just handed me. Jessica opened her front door before I even knocked, her lawyer instincts probably picking up on the tension in my face. She was wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, a far cry from the sharp-suited attorney she became during business hours. "What happened?" she asked, pulling me inside and immediately wrapping me in a hug. "You sounded like you were about to commit murder on the phone." Close, I said, setting down my duffel bag. I'm about to commit financial homicide. We settled onto her couch with glasses of wine, and I told her everything: the dinner conversation, the explicit dismissal, the years of being treated like a burden rather than a daughter. Jessica listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. "Those absolute monsters," she finally said. "Maya, I'm so sorry. I know you've told me stories over the years, but hearing it laid out like this, how are you not falling apart right now?" "Because I'm done falling apart over them," I said, taking a long sip of wine. "I've spent my entire adult life trying to earn their love, their respect, their basic acknowledgement. And tonight they made it clear that's never going to happen." "So what are you going to do?" I looked at my best friend, the woman who'd believed in me when I pitched the crazy idea of starting our own business, who'd helped me navigate contracts and negotiations and building something real, who'd celebrated every milestone my family had ignored. "I'm going to give them exactly what they asked for," I said. "They want me to vanish? Fine, but they're about to learn the difference between disappearing and becoming invisible." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Elaborate." I pulled out my phone and opened the Contacts app, scrolling until I found what I was looking for. Morrison Events has an exclusive contract for the Morrison-Patterson wedding this Saturday. 300 guests, downtown venue, completely booked through our company. "Your brother's wedding," Jessica said slowly, "the one you're now banned from attending. The one where I'm apparently such an embarrassment that my mere presence would ruin everything." I showed her the contact information. Funny thing is, they never asked who owns Morrison Events. They just assumed it was some faceless corporation they could hire and forget about. "Maya." Jessica's voice held a warning note. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about the 50% ownership stake that gives me executive decision-making power. I'm thinking about the cancellation clause in our standard contracts that allows for immediate termination under specific circumstances. And I'm thinking about how my parents just provided me with those exact circumstances. You can't be serious. They told me the greatest gift I could give my brother's wedding is vanishing from this family forever. They want me gone, I'm gone, along with every single service my company was supposed to provide." Jessica stared at me for a long moment, then started laughing. "Oh my God, you're actually going to do it. The catering, the flowers, the music, the lighting, the photography, all of it goes through Morrison Events or our partner companies. All of it can be cancelled with 24 hours notice due to hostile family dynamics interfering with our staff's ability to perform their duties safely and effectively." "Is that actually in your contracts?" "Subsection C, paragraph 4 of our standard agreement. You helped me write it after that bridezilla tried to assault our cake decorator last year." Jessica was fully grinning now. "This is either brilliant revenge or career suicide, possibly both." "It's not revenge," I said, though even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. "It's consequence. They made a choice tonight. They chose to erase me from this family, to make it clear that I'm not welcome, not wanted, not valued. Fine. But they don't get to have their cake and eat it too. Mixed metaphors aside, you realize this will destroy any possibility of reconciliation, right? There's no coming back from this." I thought about that for a moment, about the little girl who used to lie awake at night, wondering what she'd done wrong, why her parents looked at her with disappointment instead of love. about the teenager who'd worked herself to exhaustion, trying to prove she was worthy of their attention, about the adult who'd built a successful business, partly to show them she wasn't the failure they seemed to think she was. Good, I said, finally. I'm tired of trying to come back to a place I was never really welcome in the first place. Jessica clinked her wine glass against mine. Then let's plan some strategic vanishing. We spent the next 2 hours going through contracts, cancellation procedures, and the logistics of dismantling a wedding that was supposed to happen in 4 days. It was surprisingly complex. Morrison Events had been planning this wedding for 8 months, coordinating with florists, musicians, photographers, venue management, and a dozen other vendors. The flowers alone are going to be a nightmare, Jessica said, scrolling through the vendor list on her laptop. $12,000 worth of arrangements, all ordered through our partner florist. Not our problem anymore, I said, feeling lighter than I had in years. Patricia's Petals can keep the deposit and sell the arrangements to someone else. Same with the string quartet, the photographer, and the chocolate fountain rental. What about the guests? 300 people expecting dinner? What about them? My family made it very clear that guest comfort is more important than my feelings. Let them figure out how to feed 300 people with 4 days' notice. By midnight, we had a complete plan. First thing Monday morning, exactly 72 hours before the wedding, I would officially notify all vendors of the cancellation. The contracts were airtight, the legal justification was solid, and the financial impact would be substantial. Your parents are going to lose their minds, Jessica warned me, and probably their deposit money. They should have thought about that before they decided I was disposable. I crashed on Jessica's couch that night, sleeping better than I had in months. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't trying to manage my parents' expectations or minimize my presence to make room for David's shine. I was just free. When I woke up Monday morning, I had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Apparently, my parents had spent the weekend trying to figure out why I hadn't come crawling back to beg for forgiveness. The messages started apologetic and quickly turned demanding. Maya, you're being ridiculous. Come home so we can talk about this like adults. Your behaviour is childish and embarrassing. David doesn't deserve this drama before his wedding. If you don't stop this tantrum immediately, there will be consequences. I deleted them all without responding and headed to my real home, the downtown office of Morrison Events, where my actual family was waiting. My assistant Carmen looked up from her desk as I walked in. Boss, you look different. Good different. Like you finally got some sleep. Something like that, I said, settling into my chair and opening my computer. Carmen, I need you to pull up the Morrison-Patterson contract. We're implementing a cancellation under the family hostility clause. Carmen's eyes widened. The Morrison wedding? Isn't that your former brother's wedding? Yes. She stared at me for a moment, then grinned. Oh, this is going to be good. Should I prepare the cancellation notices? All of them. Every vendor, every subcontractor, every rental company. Full cancellation as of right now, effective immediately. What about the couple? Do you want me to call them directly? I thought about David, probably sitting in his pristine apartment with his fiancée, making final preparations for what they thought would be the perfect wedding. They'd never even met me, his bride-to-be. In 8 months of wedding planning, she'd only ever dealt with Carmen and our other staff members. As far as she knew, I was just some invisible business owner who'd handled the logistics behind the scenes. No, I said, let them find out the same way they'd find out if any other vendor cancelled. Business is business, right? Carmen pulled up the contracts and started typing. You know what, Maya? I've been working here for 3 years and I've never seen you take a single day off for family events. Not Christmas, not Thanksgiving, not even your own birthday. I always wondered why. Now you know. For what it's worth, I think they're idiots. You've built something incredible here. This company employs 23 people full-time and provides steady work for dozens of contractors. You've created something that matters. As Carmen sent out the cancellation notices, I sat in my office and thought about what came next. The phone would start ringing soon. Vendors confused about the sudden changes, my parents demanding explanations, David probably having a complete meltdown. But for the first time in my life, their panic wasn't my responsibility to manage. At 10:47 a.m, my phone rang. David's number, I let it go to voicemail. At 11:23 a.m, my mother called. Voicemail. At 11:58 a.m, my father. Voicemail. At 12:15 p.m, David called again, immediately followed by his fiancée, then my mother, then a number I didn't recognise. I turned off my phone and went to lunch. When I came back an hour later, Carmen was fielding calls at her desk, her voice professionally polite but firm. No, sir, the cancellation is final and legally binding. Yes, I understand it's short notice. No, there are no exceptions to company policy. She looked up at me as I walked past. Your family's attorney called. Apparently they're threatening to sue us for breach of contract. What did you tell them? That they're welcome to try, but subsection C, paragraph 4, clearly states that Morrison Events reserves the right to terminate services immediately if family dynamics create a hostile work environment that compromises our staff's safety and professional standards. And Carmen grinned. He hung up when I started reading him the exact legal language. I spent the rest of the afternoon in meetings with my actual business partners, reviewing quarterly numbers and planning our expansion into the corporate events market. It felt surreal, sitting in a conference room discussing profit margins and growth strategies, while somewhere across town, my family was probably in full crisis mode. Around 4 p.m, Jessica texted me, FYI, your dad showed up at my office demanding to know where you are. I told him attorney-client privilege prevents me from discussing your whereabouts. He did not take it well. I texted back, did you mention that I'm not actually your client in any legal capacity? Where's the fun in that? As the day wound down, I found myself feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not the fragile, temporary peace that came from successfully avoiding family conflict, but the deep, lasting peace that comes from finally being authentic. I'd spent 28 years trying to be the daughter they wanted. Tonight, for the first time, I was going to be exactly who I was. And tomorrow, they were going to learn the cost of taking me for granted. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of perfect spring weather that every bride dreams of. Clear skies, gentle breeze, temperature hovering at a comfortable 72 degrees. The Grandview Resort, perched on a hill overlooking the city, was supposed to be buzzing with activity by now. Florists arranging centerpieces, caterers setting up the kitchen, musicians doing sound checks. Instead, at 9 a.m. on what should have been the most important day of David's life, the resort's event coordinator was making frantic phone calls to anyone who might be able to salvage the situation. I wouldn't know any of this firsthand, of course. I was 20 miles away, sitting in my favourite coffee shop, reading the morning news and enjoying the first stress-free Saturday I'd had in months. But Jessica had positioned herself strategically at the resort's hotel bar the night before, booking a room under the pretense of attending a different event. She'd become my eyes and ears on the ground. Her text updates started arriving at 8:30 a.m. Wedding coordinator just ran past the lobby looking like she's seen a ghost. This is already amazing. 8:45 a.m. 2 florist trucks just left without unloading anything. The coordinator is on the phone screaming at someone about breach of contract. 9:15 a.m. Your parents just arrived. Your mother's face could curdle milk. I sipped my latte and smiled at my phone. After 3 days of panicked calls that I hadn't answered, they were finally facing the reality of what I'd tried to tell them Monday morning. You can't just disappear the person who's been holding your life together and expect everything to keep running smoothly. 9:30 a.m. David and his fiancée just pulled up. She's crying. He looks like he's about to throw up. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. For years, they'd told me I was dramatic, oversensitive, prone to making mountains out of molehills. Now they were learning what actual drama looked like. 9:45 a.m. Holy shit, Maya. Your dad is yelling at the resort manager. Something about incompetent vendors and ruining his son's special day. The manager looks confused as hell. That made me laugh out loud. The resort manager had no idea why all the vendors had cancelled. From his perspective, this was just an incredibly unlucky series of last-minute cancellations. He probably thought David and my parents were the victims of some cosmic joke, if only he knew. 10 a.m. More guests are arriving. The parking lot is full, but the reception hall is completely empty. No tables, no chairs, no decorations, nothing. This is better than reality TV. I finished my coffee and decided to take a drive. Not to the resort, obviously, but to the little park where Jessica and I used to meet for our business planning sessions when Morrison Events was just a crazy dream. I needed to process what was happening, to sit with the magnitude of what I'd set in motion. The park was peaceful, families with young children feeding ducks in the pond, couples walking hand in hand on the tree-lined paths. Normal people living normal lives, unburdened by the toxic family dynamics that had shaped my entire existence. My phone buzzed with another update from Jessica. Your mother just cornered the resort coordinator. I can hear her from across the lobby. This is impossible. We paid for everything. Someone is sabotaging my son's wedding. The coordinator is trying to explain that all the vendors cancelled due to family hostility issues, but your mum is having none of it. Family hostility issues. Carmen had chosen the language perfectly. Vague enough to be legally protected, specific enough to make the point. 10:30 a.m. Plot twist. Someone just figured out that all the cancelled vendors are connected to Morrison Events. Your dad is making phone calls trying to track down the owner. This is the moment we've been waiting for. I stood up from the park bench and walked back to my car. It was time. Not time to go to the resort. I meant what I said about vanishing from this family. But time to be exactly where I said I'd be when they finally put the pieces together. Jessica had helped me orchestrate this part perfectly. When my father inevitably called Morrison Events demanding to speak to the owner, Carmen would transfer him to my office line, where I would be waiting in the place I'd built without their knowledge or support, surrounded by the evidence of everything they'd dismissed as worthless. My phone rang at exactly 10:47 a.m., Carmen's number. "He's on line 1, she said simply. "Are you ready for this?" "I've been ready for 28 years. I took a deep breath and answered. Morrison Events, this is Maya Patterson, owner and CEO. How can I help you? The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call might have dropped. Then my father's voice, barely controlled. Maya, what? How are you? This is impossible. What's impossible, Dad? That I actually accomplished something without your help, that I built a successful business while you were busy pretending I didn't exist? You're the owner of Morrison Events? His voice cracked on the last word. 50% owner, technically. My business partner Jessica owns the other 50%. You remember Jessica, right? My college roommate, the one whose accomplishments you never bothered to acknowledge either? Another long pause. Then, Maya, this is insane. You cancelled your own brother's wedding? Your own family? Actually, I cancelled Morrison Events' contract with the Morrison Patterson wedding. Business decision, nothing personal. Nothing personal? He was shouting now. You've destroyed your brother's wedding day. 300 guests are here with nowhere to sit, nothing to eat, no music, no flowers. Sounds like a logistical nightmare, I said calmly. Good thing I'm not responsible for managing it anymore. You made it very clear Monday night that my presence, and by extension my contributions, weren't wanted. We never said, you said, and I quote, the greatest gift for your brother's wedding is you vanishing from this family forever. I'm just following instructions. I could hear chaos in the background. Voices shouting, someone crying, the general sounds of a major event falling apart in real time. My mother's voice cut through the noise. Is that Maya? Give me the phone. Maya Elizabeth Patterson. My mother's voice had that shrill quality it only got when she was losing control. You get down here right now and fix this mess. I don't think so, Mom. You were very clear that my presence would make the guests uncomfortable. Wouldn't want to ruin David's perfect day with my embarrassing existence. This is not the time for your dramatic nonsense. People are here, important people, and you've humiliated our entire family. I haven't humiliated anyone. I simply honoured your request for me to disappear. The fact that my disappearance has consequences isn't my problem to solve. Jessica's latest text popped up on my screen. The bride is having a complete meltdown in the bathroom. Her parents are threatening to leave. This is absolute chaos. Maya, please. My father had taken the phone back, his voice now pleading instead of angry. I know we hurt your feelings, but this has gone too far. Your brother doesn't deserve this. My brother watched you treat me like garbage for 28 years and never said a word. He absolutely deserves this. We can talk about our family issues later, but right now... There are no family issues to discuss later, Dad, because I'm no longer part of this family. You made that choice. I'm just living with it. Maya, be reasonable. We'll pay you double, triple what we originally agreed on. Just please get your vendors back here. And there it was, the moment I'd been waiting for without even realising it. The moment when they finally acknowledged that I had value, not as a daughter, not as a family member, but as someone with something they needed. It's not about money, I said. It never was about money. It was about respect, about being seen, about being treated like I mattered, and you showed me Monday night that I don't. Of course you matter. You're our daughter. Am I? Because daughters get invited to family events. Daughters get their achievements celebrated. Daughters get support when they're struggling and praise when they succeed. What I got was tolerance at best, and this week you decided even that was too much. The background noise was getting louder. I could hear David's voice now, high and panicked. Is she going to fix this? Is Maya going to fix this? Even in crisis, even when his perfect day was crumbling around him, David's first instinct was to assume I would clean up the mess, that I would swallow my hurt and sacrifice my dignity to save his wedding, just like I'd been swallowing and sacrificing my whole life. Maya, my mother had grabbed the phone again. Whatever we did wrong, we're sorry, okay? We're sorry. Now please, just help us fix this. You're not sorry about what you did wrong, I said. You're sorry about the consequences. There's a difference. Fine. We're sorry about the consequences too. We're sorry about everything. Just please. No. That single word hung in the air like a final judgment. I'd never said no to them before, not really. I'd sulked, I'd argued, I'd made passive-aggressive comments, but I'd never just refused outright to help them when they needed me. What do you mean, no? My mother's voice was barely controlled hysteria. I mean, no, I will not be fixing this. I will not be rescuing David's wedding. I will not be managing this crisis for you. You wanted me to vanish from this family forever, and that's exactly what I've done. Maya, think about what you're doing to innocent people. I am thinking about innocent people. I'm thinking about the innocent little girl who spent her childhood wondering why her parents looked at her with disappointment. I'm thinking about the innocent teenager who worked 3 jobs to pay for college while her brother got a free ride. I'm thinking about the innocent adult who built a successful business and never got so much as a congratulations from her own family. My voice was steady, but tears were streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, tears of release. 28 years of suppressed anger and hurt finally finding their voice. Maya, please. I'm also thinking about my employees, I continued. 23 people who depend on Morrison Events for their livelihood. People who've worked incredibly hard to build something meaningful. And I'm thinking about how my own family never once asked about those people, never showed interest in what I'd built, never even acknowledged that I was capable of building anything at all. The silence on the other end told me they were finally listening, really listening, maybe for the first time in my life. So no, I will not be fixing this. You made it clear that David's happiness is more important than my dignity. That the opinions of strangers matter more than my feelings, that I am fundamentally less valuable than my brother. Today, you get to live with those choices. Maya, my father started. I hung up. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down, but it was the good kind of shaking. The kind that comes from finally standing up for yourself after years of being pushed around. Jessica's texts were coming in rapid fire now. OMG, your parents just told David you own Morrison Events. He's completely losing it. The bride's parents are demanding their money back for the engagement party you guys catered last month. Your mum is trying to explain that you're their daughter. It's not going well. David just asked why nobody told him his sister owned the catering company. Your dad said they didn't know. David asked how they didn't know their own daughter owned a business. Your dad has no answer. The resort coordinator just announced that he can arrange emergency catering from the hotel restaurant, but it'll be a buffet of cold sandwiches and cost an additional $15,000. Half the guests are leaving. Your brother's bride just asked if she can call you directly to apologize. Your mother said absolutely not. The bride asked why not. Your mother said it's complicated. The bride said it's about to get a lot more complicated if someone doesn't fix this. I was laughing now, sitting in my car in the peaceful park while my family's perfect day imploded 20 miles away. It shouldn't have felt this good to watch them suffer. I should have felt guilty or sad or something resembling remorse. Instead, I felt free. My phone rang again, David's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Maya. His voice was raw, defeated. Maya, I don't understand. Why didn't you ever tell us about your business? Would it have mattered? Of course it would have mattered. You own the biggest event planning company in the city. That's incredible. It's the same business I've been working in for 6 years, David. The same business Mom and Dad dismissed as playing with party planning when I tried to tell them about it. The fact that it got bigger doesn't change anything. But we didn't know. You didn't know because you never asked. None of you ever asked what I actually did for work, how I could afford my apartment, where I went during the day, what my goals were, what I'd accomplished. You assumed I was failing because that fit the story you'd already written about me. That's not, he was struggling probably for the first time in his life, experiencing what it felt like to not have words, to not have answers. David, can I ask you something? Yeah, of course. In the 8 months you've been planning this wedding, did you ever once wonder why Morrison Events was the only company willing to work within your budget? Did it ever occur to you that a $150,000 wedding package that should have cost $250,000 might have been the result of someone giving you a family discount? Silence. Maya, were you paying for our wedding? Not paying for it, but I wasn't making a profit on it either. I was breaking even as a wedding gift. A wedding gift for the brother who never once stood up for me when Mom and Dad treated me like I was disposable. Oh God, Maya, I had no idea. That's the problem, David. You had no idea because you never bothered to find out. Just like Mom and Dad had no idea because they never bothered to look past their assumptions about who I was supposed to be. What can I do? How can I fix this? And there it was again. Even now, even in the middle of his own crisis, David's instinct was to assume that problems could be solved, that the right words or actions could make everything okay. It was such a fundamentally privileged way of thinking. The mindset of someone who'd never had to live with unfixable consequences. You can't fix this, David. This isn't something that gets fixed with an apology or a conversation or a promise to do better. This is the result of 28 years of choices your family made about how to treat me. You can't undo that in a phone call. But we're family. No, we're not. You're family with each other. I'm the person who used to live in your house. Maya, please, I know we messed up, I know we hurt you, but please don't let that destroy my marriage before it even starts. I looked out at the families in the park, at the normal people living normal lives with normal problems. People who supported each other, celebrated each other's successes, showed up for each other when it mattered. Your marriage isn't being destroyed by me, David. It's being destroyed by the consequences of how your family treats people they're supposed to love. The only difference is that today, for the first time, those consequences are affecting you instead of just me. What do you want? Tell me what you want and I'll make it happen. What did I want? I wanted a childhood where I felt loved instead of tolerated. I wanted parents who celebrated my achievements instead of dismissing them. I wanted a brother who saw me as a person instead of a convenient solution to his problems. I wanted a family that valued me for who I was instead of resenting me for who I wasn't. But none of that was possible anymore. I want you to learn to solve your own problems, I said finally. I want you to figure out how to have a wedding without expecting me to sacrifice my dignity to make it happen. I want you to understand that actions have consequences, even when those consequences are inconvenient for you. Maya, and I want you to stop calling me. You have 300 guests waiting for you to figure out how to feed them. That's your problem to solve now. I hung up and turned off my phone. The park was still peaceful. The ducks were still swimming in the pond. The world was still turning, completely unaffected by the Patterson family drama playing out across town. For the first time in my life, I wasn't responsible for managing their crisis. I wasn't the family problem solver, the emergency contact, the one who dropped everything to clean up their messes. I was just Maya Patterson, CEO of Morrison Events. Maya, who had built something meaningful with her own hands. Maya, who had friends who loved and supported her. Maya, who had finally learned the difference between being alone and being free. Around 2 p.m, Jessica called from the resort. "It's over," she said. "Most of the guests left by noon. They managed to get some emergency catering from the hotel restaurant, but it was basically a sad buffet of cold cuts and potato salad. The bride's family is furious. I heard her mother on the phone with someone saying this was the most embarrassing day of her life." What about David and his fiancée? They're still legally married. They managed to find an officiant and do a quick ceremony in the hotel lobby with about 30 people. But the reception was a disaster. Your parents looked like they'd aged 10 years. And the bride? She spent most of the day crying, but honestly, I think she's starting to realize what kind of family she's marrying into. I overheard her asking David why he never mentioned having a sister who owned a business. He said it never came up. She said that seemed strange. It was strange. Everything about my family was strange when you looked at it from the outside. The golden child who'd never learned to solve his own problems. The parents who'd convinced themselves that loving one child more than the other was normal. The daughter who'd been erased so completely that her own brother's bride didn't know she existed. "How are you feeling?" Jessica asked. "Free," I said without hesitation. "Scared but free." Scared of what? Scared of what comes next. I've spent my whole life trying to earn their love. Now I have to figure out how to live without even trying. Maya, you've been living without their love your whole life. You just haven't admitted it yet. She was right, of course. The love I'd been chasing was never real anyway. It was conditional, contingent on my ability to make myself smaller, quieter, less complicated. That wasn't love. That was tolerance at best. "So what now?" I asked. "Now you live your life. You run your business. You spend time with people who actually see you and value you. You stop setting yourself on fire to keep people warm who never even said thank you." That evening, I went to Jessica's apartment and we ordered pizza and watched old movies. Normal friend activities that felt revolutionary after a day of such intense family drama. We didn't talk about the wedding or my parents or what would happen next. We just existed in the present moment, two successful women enjoying each other's company. Around 10 p.m, Jessica's doorbell rang. We looked at each other, confused. Neither of us was expecting anyone. "Maya?" A voice called through the door. "Maya, I know you're in there. Please, we need to talk." My parents, they'd found me. "Don't answer it," Jessica whispered. "You don't owe them anything." But I walked to the door anyway, not to let them in, but to say what I should have said years ago. "Go home," I called through the door. "There's nothing left to discuss." "Maya, please, just 5 minutes. Let us explain." "Explain what? That you spent 28 years making me feel worthless and then got upset when I finally believed you." "We never meant to make you feel worthless." My mother's voice was thick with tears. "We love you, Maya. We've always loved you." "No, you haven't. You've loved the version of me that didn't cause problems for David. You've loved the version of me that cleaned up your messes without complaining. You've loved the version of me that made herself invisible so David could shine brighter, but you've never loved me." "That's not true," my father said. "You're our daughter. Of course we love you." I pressed my forehead against the door, feeling the weight of all those years of hoping they'd prove me wrong. If you loved me, you would have asked about my business. If you loved me, you would have celebrated my successes instead of dismissing them. If you loved me, you wouldn't have told me that the best gift I could give my brother was disappearing forever. We were upset. We didn't mean. You meant it. Maybe not consciously, but you meant it. And you know what? I'm grateful you finally said it out loud. I'm grateful you finally gave me permission to stop trying to earn something you were never going to give me anyway. The silence stretched between us, separated by Jessica's front door, but really separated by 28 years of accumulated hurt and disappointment. "Maya," my mother's voice was barely a whisper. "What can we do? How can we fix this?" I closed my eyes and thought about the little girl who would have done anything to hear those words. Who would have forgiven everything, forgotten everything, just to feel wanted by the people who were supposed to love her unconditionally. But I wasn't that little girl anymore. "You can't fix this," I said finally. "Some things can't be unfixed, some words can't be unsaid, some damage can't be undone." "But we're family," my father said, desperation clear in his voice. "No," I said, and the word felt like a door closing on the past and opening to the future. "You're David's family. I'm just someone who used to live in your house." I walked away from the door and back to the couch, where Jessica was waiting with a fresh slice of pizza and a sympathetic smile. Outside, I could hear my parents talking in hushed, frantic tones. Eventually, their voices faded as they walked back to their car. "You okay?" Jessica asked. "Yeah," I said, and for the first time in my life, I actually meant it. "I'm okay." The next morning was Sunday, and I woke up in my own bed in my own apartment for the first time in a week. No missed calls, no frantic text messages, no family crisis requiring my immediate attention. Just silence, beautiful, peaceful silence. I made coffee and sat on my balcony, watching the city wake up below me. Somewhere out there, David and his new wife were probably dealing with the aftermath of their disaster wedding. Somewhere out there, my parents were probably trying to figure out how to salvage their relationships with the bride's family. But none of that was my responsibility anymore. I thought about the question David had asked me, "What do you want?" I wanted to build Morrison Events into the premier event planning company on the East Coast. I wanted to hire more staff and expand into corporate events and destination weddings. I wanted to mentor young entrepreneurs who reminded me of my younger self. I wanted to spend time with people who saw my value without me having to prove it constantly. I wanted to date someone who was excited about my success instead of threatened by it. I wanted to travel and try new restaurants and read books and learn new skills and do all the things I'd been too busy managing family drama to explore. I wanted to live my life for me, finally and completely. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Maya, this is Sarah, David's wife. I got your number from Jessica. I know you probably don't want to hear from any of us right now, but I wanted you to know that I had no idea you existed until yesterday. David never mentioned having a sister. I'm trying to understand how that's possible, but I wanted to apologise for my part in excluding you from our wedding planning. I hope someday we might be able to meet properly. You sound like an incredible person. I stared at the message for a long time. Sarah seemed sincere, and she was certainly innocent in all of this. She'd married into a dysfunctional family without knowing how dysfunctional it really was. But she was David's problem to educate now, not mine. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I got dressed and drove to my office, where I spent the afternoon working on a proposal for a major corporate client. Real work, meaningful work, work that would grow my business and provide jobs for my employees. Work that had nothing to do with my former family. As the sun set over the city, I realised that for the first time in 28 years, I wasn't waiting for my parents to call and apologise. I wasn't hoping they'd finally see my worth. I wasn't trying to figure out how to make them love me. I was just living my life, and it felt like freedom.